everyone, welcome to the third installment of our holiday webinar series. This is Checking It Twice, a holiday checklist for marketers. Before we get started, I want to do just a quick round of intros for everyone. I'll go first. My name is Megan Conahan. I'm the EVP here at Direct Agent. I focus specifically on e-commerce. Emily, how about you go next?
Thanks, Megan. I am Emily Leese. I am a senior e-commerce strategist here at Direct Agent, mainly focused on marketplaces such as Amazon and Walmart, Target.
Hey everyone, my name is Rani Andrade. I am Director of Paid Media here at Direct Agents. I handle a lot of our social and also programmatic display strategy and marketing.
I'm Kari Motain. I am the Associate Director of Inclusive Marketing here at Direct Agents.
And I am Valentina Elegante, the Creative Manager here.
Perfect. So thank you guys all for that. So what we really want to do today is, obviously it's too late to make any really big strategic initiative changes. So what we wanted to really focus on is things that you could do right now to impact your November and December. So everything we're going to be talking about is very tactical, things you could do right now, today, tomorrow, this week, to make that really, really big impact. So I think we should just dive right into it because I know we have a lot of different content to cover. So I wanted to start off with a conversation around first-party data. And my question to you guys is really, how should marketers be thinking about using their first-party data going into November and December? I know obviously there's a lot of different use cases and things of that nature, but I really wanted to get down to kind of some of the tactical things, how you should segment your lists, et cetera, in order to make that really robust impact. Ronnie, I know you had some really great kind of thoughts around this. What would be some of your recommendations for marketers?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, like me as the media guy, my first instincts are always to try to promote first-party data as much as possible. I would say, like, this year and years going after this, it's going to be more and more of a bigger part of our digital media strategy for any advertiser. But then obviously going into the end of this year in particular, we want to make sure that we have the right mapping out applied across our channels, across our websites, to make sure that we have all those intent signals coming in, within everything that we're doing within our digital marketing scope. So for me, that sort of mapping, that sort of like tagging strategy is very, very important. We need to be able to understand how the behavior on our websites are being affected from a user's perspective, in terms of also like what is important for like a particular marketer, understanding what creatives, what audiences, what channels are driving the engagements and sticking, and actually converting. Those are all things that are going to be very, very important over the next couple of weeks. And I think the best way to approach that is just a very strong tagging and tracking strategy. So making sure that you have this conversation with your ad ops teams, your media teams, to make sure that you get the information and data that you want to get ultimately, because you want to make decisions very quickly during these times. So I think just making sure that you have that infrastructure as a foundation is very important. Two, I think also in terms of, okay, you have everything mapped out, you have everything laid out. I think going into these months, it's also important to have that sort of information trickle in because you want to engage or re-engage with previous users from before. So all marketers are tracking or basically I would say housing that CRM data in there. This is the perfect time to re-engage with them, to have that sort of messaging with them, and have specific strategies and campaigns that reactivate within those users. I would also say lastly, and I would say the best lookalike model or strategy is within first-party data. I think this is a time in which we should certainly be thinking about refreshing a lot of like these audiences, because we certainly want the most up-to-date lookalike models within our campaigns, within our targeting strategy as well.
I think going on what Ronnie was saying about lookalike audiences, that overlap percentage is always really important. A lot of times when we're pushing lookalike audiences throughout the year, we're hitting a lot of the same users again. And if there are any new user strategies that we want to approach, it's really important to look at the overlaps between those. And as Ronnie was saying, having that segmented approach and getting a good understanding of the different user behaviors. Mm-hmm. If you have those tagged out, then you can build lookalike models off of those and start to experiment a lot more and grow the overall pool outside of maybe the core lookalike sets that you've been going after. The other piece I think is suppression windows. I think for a lot of users, especially depending on the persona and the overall socioeconomic area of the user, there might be a lot more repeat purchase behaviors that are coming. There might be a lot of folks that are buying goods, especially the folks that are buying goods early in October, that really like a good, that might want to come back and buy it again. And it's good to have that reminder in place during the holiday season. So I would really advise brands to take a hard look at those suppression windows, especially within their prospecting segment, and potentially, really kind of narrowing that window a bit.
Yeah. And Valentina, I'd love to get your perspective, obviously coming from the creative view. Are there certain creative strategies people should be using to target their first party data versus completely new customer acquisition? What does that look like? What would you recommend?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that creative has to change within the funnel and being able to target messaging as it goes along. Something that you are messaging for a repeat customer isn't going to be the same as acquiring a new customer. So making sure that we're really customizing the messaging and making sure that we're understanding the audience with the data that we do find or that we do have access to, and making sure we're utilizing that. Not only making creative that looks good, but we know that it's going to align with the audience, and something that will get them to convert or get them to learn a little bit more about the brand is really important.
Yeah, and I do think using first party data is obviously super important, but we also know that during Q4 and the holidays, people are trying new brands, they're testing new things, they're buying from brands that they've never tried before, essentially. So how do you go about finding new customers efficiently, right? You have a good first party data strategy, you have your lookalikes, you've fixed your suppression windows, but you really need to go out and prospect. So what are the things that you can do to make an impact on new customer acquisition? And Emily, I'd love to get your perspective from the marketplace kind of side of the business.
Yeah, definitely. Amazon is a great place to start when thinking of new customer acquisition and really trying to get in front of a new audience. I think we've mentioned this stat before, but over 70% of consumers do consider Amazon their primary shopping destination online. So your first battle is just getting your listings on Amazon or Walmart or Target, but we know Amazon is top tier. The next battle is getting your products in front of as many consumers as possible. So really driving traffic and visibility to your brand. The best way to do that is through sponsored brand and sponsored product ad units on Amazon. We do find that regardless of category, the majority of consumer searches on Amazon are non-branded. So I would really ensure, obviously before Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but getting it in place right now, that you understand what those top non-brand searches are in your category and find which non-branded searches make sense to target throughout sponsored product and sponsored brand placements to drive more engagement. We often find that sponsored product drives a lot of attributed revenue. So that's always the easiest one to try and go after and win. Around 40 to 70% of our attributed revenue for our clients do come from sponsored product placements. And when you're running sponsored product placements, I really want to ensure that everyone is going in and checking those bid placements. So obviously you can optimize for product placements with sponsored product or top of search. We find the best results when we index for top of search. So again, if you have campaigns where you're finding that you have the most opportunity in specific non-brand phrases, I would make sure to optimize for top of search in those specific campaigns. This is something that we're focusing on a lot during Q4 for our clients. We actually have an in-house, what we call share of voice technology that scrapes Amazon's web pages every 15 minutes, every single day for your top non-brand keywords. And we can really start to understand both organically and from a paid placement perspective where there's opportunity gaps for us and where we can actually start competing a little bit better with our top competitors and drive the most new sales. So that's definitely the biggest thing when it comes to Amazon.
Yeah, and for brands who maybe aren't selling on Amazon, or those who are looking for maybe some more strategies for their .com. Ronnie, could you touch on maybe some of the things that people could do outside of marketplaces and Amazon to really make that new customer acquisition impact? Because I completely agree with Emily. Amazon is such a beast when it comes to finding new customers and the non-brand searches that happen there, but so many of our brands are still heavily reliant on .com sales. So could you touch on some of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think obviously the challenge at hand, especially now, and is that the brand loyalty is starting to waver, right? And I believe the stats about 50% of users are going to be opening up to like new brands. But I also see that as an opportunity for us as well. Specifically within social media, I think this is a great way for us to really get our brand out there and at least have that conversation. And there's been much said about, let's say, also the brand loyalty within Facebook, right? Users are starting to go into multiple social media platforms as it's trying to diversify. As marketers, we also need to adapt and make sure that we're adapting to that as well and opening up our scope. So I think we need to have a very good brand presence starting now across these additional channels, and I'm talking about like the TikToks, I'm talking about like the Snapchats as well, just so users who are probably looking for a different brand or probably thinking about their shopping right now, get to see our brand right now during this time. The other thing I would say is just a lot of these platforms have seen this opportunity as well and started creating tools from a creative standpoint as well to make shopping that much easier on social media. So I would say just about everything has a shoppable integration at the moment. And it helps us, one, to, yes, get that brand presence out there, but then also get a DR sort of aspect going as well. So let's just make use of them. There's a lot of feeds, there's a lot of ways to utilize our products or showcase our products within very beautiful settings, interactive settings within an ad unit. Everything is now being optimized towards mobile and video as well. So we just need to embrace these tools that are out there and just make sure that we get that brand presence known during this time.
Awesome. I mean, what you said too about, I think, prospecting and finding new customers, and it's really important for us to be focused on other channels and things like that. I think that's really important. But the conversation, I guess, where I want to take this conversation is then defining goals, right? Because if we're prospecting for net new customers, it's not going to be the same 1,000% ROAS that you might get from retargeting or anything like that. So if you're thinking about using social commerce or social or any channel for customer acquisition, how should you be thinking about goals? What are the KPIs that you should be looking for? And obviously those are going to change, right? Your first week of December KPI is going to be very different than like a Black Friday KPI. So how should marketers define that goal? So Ronnie, I'd love if you could continue to iterate on that.
Absolutely. And I know this is a difficult conversation, especially because we all have goals that we need to achieve. We all have quotas that we need to go after. But sometimes we're also smart. We know that a DR goal at the end needs to come through a multitude of events and interactions with a user base. And that's why it's very important, beyond that main media goal that you want to achieve, whether it be a specific ROAS, the 1,000% ROAS that you're talking about, or CPA, it's also important to start mapping out what those secondary goals would be like as well, because you're basically fostering a whole funnel. You're fostering a whole journey in which we need to get users, one, to understand our brand first and foremost, especially during a time where competition is going to be very, very, very tight. And two, we need to get them to our site. We need to get them to really look at the offering and have them convert. So it's something that's not going to happen overnight. Therefore, we need to have those secondary, those tertiary goals as well, and have a timeline in that sense. Granted, I'm not going to have the CPA efficiency or the ROAS efficiency that I want week 1 or week 2, but that being said, I am looking at these secondary goals that are going to ultimately convert in the end. And that's why, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's important to have that tracking very much set up, because those are going to be the signals that tell you, okay, there's something happening here that is going to ultimately result in the goals that I want, and or it's not, right? But at least if you have that sort of tracking capability, you're able to pivot. And I think that's my ultimate last point as well. You need to be nimble. You need to, be able to pivot from that sense in terms of, are we seeing different channels perform better? Is our goal overall just a little bit more realistic? Do we need to send people through a different journey on the landing pages as well? I think especially, in the next coming weeks, it's going to be very, very important in terms of how quickly we adapt. But then going to some of my first points, it's it's not going to be possible if we don't have those signal reads at the very beginning.
And Corey, I know that you like to look at things much more holistically when it comes to KPIs. So do you have anything to add, any ways that marketers should look at things in, I guess, a more omni-channel way?
Yeah, I think what Ronnie was saying about the secondary and the primary goals is really important. So I always treat the KPIs as separate from the overall goal of the brand. So especially with our subscription clients, we've pivoted a lot to just looking at total CAC models.
Yep.
And I think that that's a critical element when we're talking about how we're measuring success, because we know obviously that tracking is going to be not as strong as it was last year. So it's really important for brands to pivot into that overall, hey, okay, maybe CPAs are down 5-10% this year, but let's take a look at how our total CAC is performing in comparison to our overall objectives. And if that's the case, it's really important to have these KPIs set up because they are performance indicators, but they aren't the performance itself that we're trying to drive. So I think that that's really a core element. And I think for us especially, what we've been doing is even with a lot of our performance campaigns, we've been trying to layer in additional areas where we can measure KPIs, whether that's brand lift studies, whether that's measuring consideration, any sorts of additional metrics that we can pick up, because we know that we aren't capturing the full picture all along the way. So that would be my core piece of advice there, is take a look at your CACs. Don't freak out if your CPAs are not as good as they were last year, because it is expected kind of in the environment that we're in.
No one's CPAs are as good as they were last year.
Unfortunately, right?
Take me back to 2019, man. Valentina, from your perspective, if we're looking at creative KPIs, what are the things you think that should be indicators, even if, to their point, you might not be seeing the ROAS or the return that you might immediately expect? What are the things that you would really look at when you're looking at creative performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, creative fatigue is absolutely real. Right now we're being targeted from so many different brands. Again, there isn't that brand loyalty there. So how can you continue to innovate and get new ideas within creative? And the first thing is really looking at performance, making sure that we're understanding what is aligning with your current audience and clientele, because just because the industry itself is moving one way doesn't mean the audience is going to follow suit from there. So being able to review CTA's lifestyle or product photography, what do we think is working? Words like sale versus discounted, there are different indicators that we're able to see. Study shows that the word get has an average of a 53% higher purchase rate rather than the word shop, or things like limited versus getting it now. So these little indicators that can really make or break a CTA or make the design. Again, every element could be right, but if you're not seeing the key indicators of the smaller details, that can really change the way that these creatives are performing. Again, understanding or dedicating some time to video, that is something that we're seeing, but really making sure that we're understanding the platforms and using creative not only as an additional bump, but as it being part of the initial strategy and the original plan there.
That's a really good point that you had about creative testing, and I guess I'm going to open it up to everyone. So I think the get versus, I can't remember the other one, but that's really, I think, interesting learnings. But for some brands, they want to lock down all testing, right? They want to say oh my gosh, I don't want to test anything in November. Do you guys think that that's the right move? Do you think that there's still a place for especially for creative testing as we go into November and December for especially some of these more micro kind of CTA type things? Or does lockdown testing mean no new massive big initiatives kind of thing? What would you guys recommend?
I would say that you should have the majority of the testing done beforehand, and you really kind of picking out some of the best players or the best bets coming into the holiday period. That being said, that doesn't mean that there should be any testing during the holiday period, of course. I do think that there is very interesting things about especially creative messaging, creative positioning, that the way that I love to see it from a very almost architect, standpoint. how do we actually have the messaging change over time? And because we've seen like the trends completely change and pivot depending on where we are during the point of engagement. Branding creatives and the messaging that we utilize then have a completely almost like 180 effect in certain clients, at some of like the later stages of the funnel as well. And then on top of that, in terms of just like best practices, it's like we've seen some of the best practices just being thrown out the window as well, and it just works for your brand. So yes, I do think because of those like little nuances, there always should be some level of testing happening all the time as well. I think that just makes my world happy as a media planner for sure. But I do think there should be at least a bigger idea or like a bigger understanding of like, hey, we've done testings in the past. These are kind of like the best bets that we want to go with, going into like this period.
Yeah. And I that's what I mean. I didn't want everyone to say like, oh, well, we can't test that because we're not testing, because I still think a lot of these tests can be really impactful as we go into the next few months, and they're relatively easy to execute too, which I think is really important. You can really make a big difference. Before we get off this topic of defining goals, Emily, I know you are itching to talk about some more marketplace initiatives and how you're recommending people define their goals on Amazon. So could you talk through, because I know this is something that we struggle with attribution windows and things of that nature. How are you recommending your brands right now, as you're planning for November and December, define those goals and those KPIs if we look at Amazon or just marketplaces in general?
Definitely. I mean, first and foremost, not necessarily a KPI, but setting yourself up for success. I would ensure that my SEO and my advertising strategies aligned. This is something that I don't think is even talked about or touched on enough in the industry, but this is incredibly important, especially on marketplaces like Target and Walmart, where your advertising is directly dependent on your product pages and the keywords throughout your SEO, but it's becoming even more important on Amazon. A great example is we had a client where we're trying to show up for different kid holiday key terms, and we were, bidding far above that average CPC, and we were not even seeing our ad serve. We were not seeing impressions. And then when we kind of started diving in more, we could tell that the ads that were serving for those top placements had those keywords all throughout their SEO. So you don't want to think of your SEO as something that is completely different than your advertising or even like a one and done project throughout the year. You definitely want to optimize seasonally and align that with your advertising strategy. And then when we get a little bit more narrow and focus on KPIs, I would really look at conversion rates as my key KPI throughout Q4. This is both on the organic side and on the marketing side. So I should expect to see my conversion rates increase. Obviously, the worst thing is to spend all that money and get consumers to your product pages and then lose that conversion. So one thing we obviously want to do across marketplaces during Q4 is run promotions. Easy last minute promotions would be coupons on Amazon and rollbacks on Walmart. So these are things where you can kind of just move and groove and you don't need to be super far pre-planned ahead. And obviously we have a lot of inventory issues going on. So they're just a really great way to kind of shift things around last minute and keep those conversion rates increasing throughout Q4.
That's a really great point, because one of the things that we do see, like we said, is more people are coming to our sites, there's more people shopping, there's more people who've never been to our site or Amazon product detail pages or Amazon brand store before. So if we talk about like from a user experience perspective, we have all of these net new customers coming in. We want to keep them, we want to convert them, obviously. So what are some things that brands can do to really increase the conversion rate or discourage page bounces? Emily, I know you brought this up, so I'd love if you'd be able to talk a little bit about what you can do on Amazon specifically, and then let's talk about pivoting to .com.
Definitely. One thing I would make sure to do is optimize my brand store for holiday. So just like you wouldn't optimize once a year for your SEO, you definitely don't want to do the same thing for your brand store. You want to make seasonal updates and changes. Amazon has made it really, really easy to push through temporary brand stores and optimize your evergreen brand store for holiday. So one of the biggest things I would do is create like a best deals page. I know we were talking about promotions and coupons. So at the very forefront of your store, you should try to showcase all of the different deals that you're planning this season. That is incredibly easy to do. It literally will take you 2 minutes, and then again you can put an end date on so that that's not left up during Q1 next year. And the other thing is just being cognizant of your reviews. Obviously, reviews are incredibly important across e-commerce. The consumer can't touch that product or kind of play around with it like they can in store. So they really rely on reviews. Especially as a seller, you need to make sure you are contacting any customer that leaves a negative review. It's going to cost you a lot less in the end to give them a refund on the product than it is to have them leave that review up. And we have seen more times than not when consumers are issued a refund and go through a really positive customer service experience that they actually change that review. So it could go from like a 1 or a 3 to a 3-star review, or they'll take it down altogether. That is incredibly, incredibly important for Q4. So staying on top of your customer service.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think what you said too about reviews is really important. I was reading something, and I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it was, consumers right now are really interested in authenticity and reviews and user-generated content, because you can see the products on somebody who looks like you, or you have this like unfiltered view of the brand from someone who looks like you, your size, your shape, your coloring, etc. So I think that's really important. But Kari, I'd love if you could go into maybe some things that you would recommend brands do for their .com to discourage conversion rates. And I know you probably have some perspective on UGC and things of that, but I'd love to get a sense of how can brands make changes right now to increase their conversion rate, decrease bounce rate?
Yeah, I think that the underlying point across all of this is the consistency element.
Yeah.
So I think Emily made a great point about having a really good post-purchase process in terms of returns and encouraging folks to leave reviews based off of that process. And I think that it's also important for us in the advertising space and the marketing space who are in the pre-purchase phase to talk with the folks that are working in the purchase phase, which is the website, even the in-store experience where it's relevant, because that's really going to be the make or break in terms of whether or not folks are going to be able to make the final purchase. So I think in particular, ensuring that they're aligned. So, I think Ronnie and I have had a lot of conversations about TikTok. One of the big areas there is that if you are leveraging UGC in TikTok, make sure you're leveraging UGC on the site. If there's a huge disconnect and you are, advertising with a certain style of creative, and you get to the site and it's something totally different, you're going to lose the folks right away because that initial element that they wanted to engage with on your brand is lost. So I think that as a whole, you want to make sure that you have that consistency with that feel of your advertising throughout the entire process. But I also think that, just from a cost savings, we all know that advertising this season is going to be expensive. The less relevant your landing page is, the more you're going to get dinged in auctions. And we know that at this point, every dollar and cent counts in terms of reducing the costs of your overall media investment and getting the most out of that during this time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ronnie, any other things to add as the resident media guru here?
I would say what we also, once again, go into like the whole tracking aspect of it. It's like sometimes what we need to do is optimize our campaigns to the behavior that we want, and sometimes it's very easy for us to try to optimize towards that last event overall, but with the signal loss that's we're getting because of iOS 14, it's something that we need to sometimes go a little bit more higher funnel, right? And I, once again, am advocating those secondary goals, and we want to, let's say, optimize towards like quality site traffic sometimes, right? Because let's say we don't have the conversion volume that we want to see very just right now at the very moment, but if we're optimizing at least to people getting to the site, then we could start troubleshooting in terms of what else is kind of keeping people from converting. So making sure that we have our media campaigns get that chance overall. From a data perspective, from an optimization perspective, as we're also trying to balance and figure out some of the journey conversations as well.
And I know when we think about conversion rate and user experience, I think all of that is great. But Valentina, I'd also love kind of your perspective from kind of the creative side of the coin. What are the things that people can do with their creative or different, very easily interchangeable creative assets on site that could make a big impact and keep somebody on the page?
Yeah, absolutely. I think similar to what Emily said is making sure that you're optimizing and taking advantage of all the different elements on the different storefronts or on product pages there. We can't assume that that customer or that person is going to go onto the website. So making sure that that product page or that storefront, whether it's on Amazon or Walmart or whatever, looks equally as nice as your .com. Making sure that the photography is really sharp, making sure that we're really focusing on what messaging is there. If you're putting free shipping on your .com, making sure you're putting free shipping on that Amazon page or whatever marketplace you're focusing on, because we are seeing specific messaging that is going to keep people on that site. Whether it is 79% of users are really important, or they find that the price is really important, being able to not have to go down and look for it, or making sure that product availability, especially now that everyone around is hearing about the shortage and delayed shipping, people now really want to know, where you're still assuming, oh, it's fine, I'm going to get it in 2 days, but now that isn't necessarily the case for everything. So making sure we're being transparent with product availability. Again, shipping, are there going to be delays? What are we able to do and put out there? So making sure that we're really, again, seeing them on that .com or marketplace, we're really treating it as the main point of contact there. So you'll see that throughout, again, making sure we're having that messaging really on the forefront, and again, making sure that it really looks sharp, whether, again, strong photography, products, and really getting it so that they feel like they're getting the full experience, even if it's not on your direct platform.
Yeah, I think what you said is true. It's just like give people what they want. Like tell them what they want, best price. They want to make sure it comes in 2 days. They want to make sure they have flexible returns, and just making sure you're communicating that with them on the website, on the creative, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Valentina, you touched on this a little bit, but obviously logistics is a real fun time right now, right? So we can't control inventory issues, right? Especially as an agency, there's only so much we can do. But I really did want to see if you guys could give some actionable things that brands can do, if they sell out or whatever it might be, so they have a solid strategy in place to still make sure they have a really strong Q4. So Emily, I'd love if you could start kind of talking about Amazon and marketplaces. What are some of the recommendations that you are making to brands right now so that they can capture as much holiday demand as possible?
Definitely. I would encourage brands to think a little bit differently than they might normally during this Q4 in terms of logistics, and even kind of diving back into that consumer experience perspective. If I was a brand with a D2C site, oftentimes I do not want to redirect traffic to Walmart or Amazon. I want to protect my margins. I want to keep consumers on my site. But if I had a really popular product that I knew received a lot of engagement on my page, but I knew it was nearing out of stock, or it was out of stock or not being able to be shipped in time, one thing we are encouraging brands to do is actually include link out buttons like buy now on Amazon or get it faster on Walmart, something like that, still available on another marketplace. And actually link out to these other sources that could still have inventory so that you're capturing the overall sales still. And I would aim at growing my brand holistically and looking at that overall market share and not necessarily just like hyper-focusing on one platform or another.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I know Amazon obviously gives you some incentives for driving direct traffic to your site too, so it could have some kind of unintended benefits other than just increased sales velocity, essentially. But if we think about, Valentina, you kind of brought up the point with creative. What are the other things that you think we should be doing from a creative perspective to to, I guess, make sure that everybody is really aware of what's going on, and to, again, still make sure we're capturing as many sales as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So transparency really is key here. Whether we're promoting the shipping cutoff date, don't do it when it's a week before, making sure that people, when they're shopping for holidays, know what day they need to, put their orders in to get it before, that intended holiday. Making sure that we're promoting excitement also beforehand. Don't really wait for that Black Friday and the Cyber Monday, because we know that that's going to essentially be too late. So how can we tailor messaging to really help with that logistic on the back end, but not making it seem, oh, you have to buy now because we're trying to push the sale, but really, what is a benefit for them? If you buy now, it's because you're going to get that guaranteed shipping. If you buy now, you are going to get that sale. And it isn't going to be something that we're so used to waiting to the last minute because of all these big incentive days, but transparency will help them understand and trust your brand when we're making these recommendations there. And again, just really being able to tell the consumer what is going on. If there is going to be a shortage, making sure there's a way that you can get it out there, whether there's 5 in stock left, there's 3 in stock left, or again, like Emily said, it may be not available in Amazon, but you can find that on Walmart, you can find that on our .com, and really making sure that the user knows that we're on their side and not just trying to push the sale.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about trying to spur holiday shopping to start early. Emily, I'm sure knows, she's our resident marketplace expert, but Amazon's already started their Black Friday. They have Black Friday worthy deals happening right now. They have the holiday beauty haul happening in October. There's so many things that they're doing to push holiday shopping starting earlier. I think it's fine for brands to take that same initiative for their .com and say, okay, how do we rework our creative messaging, what's happening on our website, so that everyone knows now is the time to shop, right? And I see it everywhere. Everyone's talking about the shipping delays and the logistics delays, but Kari, I'd also love to get your perspective. Strategically, are there any kind of strategy changes or things people should be thinking about, pivoting to gift cards or digital products or things like that? What are some other things that people should be, or brands should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think a big piece is that, especially given this return to retail and in person that we've seen, the relationship between digital and in-store has never been closer. So we have these really interesting customer journey pieces that obviously as digital marketers we don't have insight into, but that we still need to account for nonetheless. So I think that it's really important that if you have to push certain lines of product, but your digital presence and your digital store, your .com doesn't have it, just like you would push it to Amazon or Walmart, also considering, saying, hey, we have availability at these locations, or hey, we can potentially drive an in-store campaign as well.
Going to a store, oh my goodness.
I know, right?
It's sacrilege for a marketer.
It really is. Yeah, I know, but I think that it's so important, and it ties into the next sacrilegious thing that I want to say, which is also, don't be afraid to pull back. I think if you know that, following the 80-20 rule, those 20% of products that are driving 80% of your revenue aren't on the table anymore, I would pull back, and I would recommend that to my clients, and I have been recommending that to my clients. And I think for, we as marketers, we put a lot of hype on Q4, and I think that it's important, it's an important time of year, but it's also not for every brand, right? And I think that especially it's not gonna be for every brand when you're starting to look at supply shortages, we don't have our top products and all these other areas. So I think that, from that standpoint, it's really important to take a hard look at your inventory forecast. And if you are seeing that there are going to be those gaps, don't be afraid to say, hey, why don't we pivot investment into Q1, based off of that.
Yeah, I want to come back to this point, but do you think, or have you been seeing success in making recommendations to clients to pivot to gift cards or anything like that? How has that been a factor in your planning? Obviously, because then they can spend it at another date and time and all of that. What does that look like? Is that a viable strategy for most brands?
I think gifting is always a really important element. I think that the one area that a lot of brands often miss is, again, that consistency piece. Mm-hmm. So we'll drive and we'll say in our advertising, hey, purchase gift cards, but then it's really hard to discover on the site. And at the end of the day, if you have that full-on experience for the gifting area, you will see that folks will really start to engage a lot more with your brand in terms of gift cards. And, I think to your point, the added value to that is that not only do you get that individual there, but then you have that, you know, person-to-person marketing start to kick in a lot more. And while that's not attributable, right, I think that it's such an important element that we often overlook as marketers in the digital space.
So Kari, that sets up the conversation really perfectly for the next topic that I wanted to cover, which is how do you set yourself up for a big January? And obviously, like you said, if you don't have inventory, maybe pull back in November and December, maybe focus on gift cards, all of those other things. But what are the other things brands should do to think about making sure, yes, Q4 is huge. We know that. That's where everyone makes a lot of money, but we also don't want to forget about, spend all of this time focusing on the next 2 months and completely forget about starting off our year strong.
Right.
So what are some recommendations you're making to brands right now? And this can be a little bit obviously more long-term. We have a few months lead time, I suppose, but what should brands be doing to set themselves up for that really solid January to capitalize on a really great kind of end of 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first consideration, and I'll come back to the budgets a little bit, but I think the first consideration is definitely UGC. So I think that especially right now, the holiday season is always a great opportunity to capture new UGC, new folks that are engaging with your brand, new folks that are sharing, you know, the individuals. And it's not always going to be in a holiday context. Sometimes people are just really happy to show off their new wardrobe, their new items, kind of there. So I think you really want to use that as an opportunity to kind of like front load the UGC that you're going to have for the rest of the year, and really angle it for some of these other media channels, as well as, you know, your .com as well. But then of course, getting back to that, you know, that budgetary standpoint, I think it's really important to take a look at your brand and take a look at your goals, as we were talking about before, and taking a really firm understanding of like, okay, what is the value of Q4 for us? Are we pushing it because we're marketers and we love Q4 and we want to push it, or is it because it's a crucial time for our brand? And if it's the first one, you know, I think that it's important to take an angle and maybe push budgets into January. If you're, you know, for example, I'm going to call out one brand, but if you're like Hermes, the overall interest in your brand is not very different in December than it is from March and April and May. It's kind of consistent year round, and you're not having any sales, so why pay more money to reach, you know, an audience that's going to be more expensive, less engaged, because there's just going to be more, you know, there's more competition in the space, when you can go in after your competitors have exhausted their budget really strong into Q1, and really, you know, one, to have really strong brand awareness because you'll be paying less, you'll be getting a lot more reach, and then two, you know, you'll be able to hopefully pick up on a lot more revenue as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Ronnie, I know you had some kind of similar points about trends and really capitalizing on certain trends in January. So could you touch a little bit on how you would recommend marketers thinking through their January campaigns?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've outlined that marketer FOMO is a real thing. But to Kari's point, we need to have a genuine conversation amongst our own brand to make sure that is this the right time for us to really capitalize on it. And the trends have been showing that January is still very much a pitiable month, depending on like the brand overall. But the way I think about January, there's the allure of the new year, and then from a person, or like I would say from like a consumer perspective, I'm thinking about like my resolutions, I'm thinking about like my new projects. People are trying to dress themselves, you know, to a new look, and actually apparel for last year went up 52% the year before that in January. So there's opportunity, and I know we've been talking mostly for the B2C, but like even from like a B2B perspective, this might be a great time for brands to be, or I should I say companies to be looking for, let's say, new products, new features for their agency or company. So even from both scopes, I think there is an opportunity there. We just need to make sure that is our brand making sense, or is it better for us to probably save those marketing dollars for a time where there's less competition, obviously, and you know, I would even say from like a margins perspective, it's like we don't have to compete with promos and sales. So it's very much a conversation about how genuine we are and how we want to approach ourselves.
Yeah. And Valentina, Ronnie made a great point that, you know, trends will change and what people, New Year's resolutions and all of that stuff. So how can you go, and I also think the UGC point is really important too. How can brands think about changing their creative messaging? Because it is a really quick shift. It's like holiday, sale, Black Friday, and now it's something completely different. How would you recommend brands think about their creative messaging as they go into January? What are some things that they can do or things that they can start thinking about to make sure that they have their Q1 or January kind of creative properly positioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really having a plan, and again, not neglecting January. Like we've all mentioned here, the shopping is going to continue in January. Again, whether it's people redeeming gift cards, it's people making returns, it's people who have store credit. So making sure that the creative doesn't feel like it's left over from the holidays, but it really is targeting that New Year's feel, that it feels fresh, that it's still on, encouraging people to continue to shop. Just because the holidays are over doesn't mean you need to stop spending. So making sure we're really putting out new creative, and that really comes from planning before. So even as we focus on holiday, making sure that we have that next step right after holiday instead of just continuing to stop and preparing for February, March, and April. January is really crucial there. And to the point that Kari mentioned, UGC is going to be huge. There's a lot of people that are going to be putting out reviews, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram or whatever it is, really just showing off and making sure that you're capitalizing on that as well, being able to create relationships with different individuals to share that content on there. And again, getting that authenticity, because people are really just aligning with that rather than saying, oh, the brand is saying this is one of our best products yet and this is why you should buy it, versus seeing, again, someone that looks like you or speaks like you or whatever it is, being like, that's the product that is going to suit me because I trust that person. Because, whether we're on the same path of life or that's a college student, I'm a college student, this is what I need or this is what it is, rather than, again, having a brand saying, oh, you're going, and January is a little different, but oh, you're going back to school, this is the laptop that you need. So UGC is really going to be crucial for that as well. And again, you're going to be getting a lot of that content out there.
And then Emily, to kind of round it out, from the marketplace perspective, from Amazon's perspective, obviously, it's such an intent-driven platform. People go when they're shopping. Obviously, shopping takes a little bit of intent-driven shopping takes a little bit of a downturn in January. So what are the things that you found have been really successful to keep up those January sales post-holiday?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the biggest things I would focus on would be re-engaging those consumers. As a brand, you just invested a lot of money in Q4 finding new consumers and expanding your reach. Now what you want to do is re-engage those consumers regardless of if they actually purchased your product or not. If they visited your product page, getting back in front of them, they showed interest at some point, so re-engaging them during January. This often is a lot less expensive than competitive or non-brand targeting. So sponsored display is a great way to do this on Amazon. They have come out with so many updates in the past couple of months, and literally every week I log onto my computer and see a new update for sponsored display and advanced targeting opportunities. And they now have CPM models directly in the advertising console with sponsored display, which obviously we've been seeing a lower average cost to engage those consumers. The other thing, is that we want to push as many sales as we can going into the new year, but for a lot of brands, January isn't their peak time. It isn't, the time where they want to invest more. So re-engaging past consumers is less expensive. But the other thing to keep in mind is it's just a great time from a brand awareness perspective to start engaging those consumers and continuously going back to them to re-engage them and make sure your brand is top of mind leading into that next event, whether it be Valentine's Day or Easter or, that next big sales peak. And again, any of those CPM based model tactics are really, really great for brand awareness and re-engaging. So just making sure your advertising strategy makes sense in the term of marketing funnel, depending on when your peaks are throughout the year.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, I think that is the upcoming holidays, Valentine's Day and Father's Day, Mother's Day, everything that comes up, it's really important for us to continue to build that brand. And you forget how quickly post Q4 all of those things hit really fast. So thank you, Emily. So that's about it for our holiday webinar for today. Thank you guys all so much for joining us, and thank you all for all of your wonderful answers and expertise. If you do have any questions, or if there's anything we didn't cover here today, please feel free to email marketing@directagents.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you. But thank you all again. Have a great rest of your Q4.